extending our welcome and aloha to all of you from all over the corners of the earth here, joining us again for our 8th ʻŌlelo Ola Hilo field study. I'm sure you will be um, enjoying what we have prepared for you on the theme of Makahana Kaike Pono Kaulike, or through justice. Justice through action. We're here in Hawaii, of course, we've been engaged with this movement for revitalizing our language through using our language as the medium of education, from infant toddler all the way up through high school and even beyond into tertiary university and college education degrees. So today and tomorrow, we will be scheduling our He ʻŌlelo Hilo field study for all of you who have joined us. Mahalo anui loa. Thank you so much for joining us, and we welcome you to our program for these 2 days. Mahalo, aloha, ahui o kako. We'll see you at our panel discussions. Mahalo.
Hi, aloha kako o wano Amy Kalili, like pu ko leo aloha, ya o ko pakahia po no ke ia launa ana I kia la. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Kalili, and I extend my aloha to all of our attendees and participants today for joining us today. I have the pleasure of moderating the 5 panels that we'll engage in today. And so once again, thank you to all of you for joining us. And also for our panelists. I'm going to go ahead and ask our first 3 panelists if they'd go ahead and unmute themselves and turn on their video cameras, just so that we can see their lovely faces as well. We are here for our very first panel for today, and the title of the panel is Pūnana Leo Language Nests, Overcoming Unjust External Control Over Childcare and Preschooling. The reestablishment of a preschool through graduate level Hawaiian language education pathway began with our Pūnana Leo language nests. And the Aha Pūnana Leo is celebrating their 40th anniversary this year, 40 years of reestablishing a Hawaiian language medium pathway of education, starting with the youngest of our family, the youngest of our ohana, our kamali'i, or our children. And while APL's flagship program are these Pūnana Leo preschools, the impact of the organization has gone well beyond that. But these Pūnana Leo centers themselves, however, started in spite of significant barriers, both at the early education level and beyond that, once our children and families began to matriculate into what is now the Hawaii State Department of Education's Immersion and Hawaiian Language K-12 program. Those barriers existed then, and some of them persist until today, and frankly are the result of unjust colonial acts that happened in the past, and a mindset that we are overcoming but continues to persist to today. And so we are very fortunate to have these 3, in my humble opinion, pretty amazing wahine that are with us this morning. They're all mentors of mine. I have been involved and been fortunate to be a part of the Hawaiian language movement for a couple of 2 or 3 decades now. And these women helped, I think, bring me into the fold, teach me a lot, not only about what the movement stands for, but how to play an active role in therein. They are all, first and foremost, parents and mothers and or grandmothers of graduates from the preschool, from Pūnana Leo preschools and or Navihi o Kalani o Pu'u. We have Koanoe Kamana, who is one of our founding board members for the Aha Pūnana Leo. She's also the principal at Navihi o Kalani o Pu'u, which is a K-12 Hawaiian medium education school as well. She's also an associate faculty at Kahakaʻula o Ke'elikolani. And so we're very fortunate to have Koanoe join us this morning. Aloha Kawa.
Aloha.
We also have Ekekela Aiona with us. And again, she was one of our very first ohana, very first parents who joined the Pūnana Leo preschool with her ohana and her babies. They all went on to graduate from Navihi o Kalani o Pu'u as well. And she has a bunch of beautiful mo'opuna or grandchildren now in the program. Ekekela played various roles in the leadership of Aha Pūnana Leo for, maybe 30 plus years, Ekekela. And now she is a 5th and 6th grade teacher at Hana Elementary on the east side of the island of Maui. And one thing I think that everyone will notice is that those who come in and be a part of this movement, you end up wearing a bunch of hats and playing a bunch of different roles. And these women are a testament to that. And so aloha ka'awe ekekela.
Hello, my kako.
And finally, wrapping up our panelists this morning is none other than Namaka Rollins. She has been a part of the movement again since the very beginning. She was the original executive director of Pūnana and served in that capacity for, I don't know, Namaka 20 plus years, I believe. She is still with Pūnana and plays a very critical role in leadership there as the senior director of outreach. Namaka has had, I should say, a wealth of experience when it comes to advocacy on a grassroots level, a local level, statewide, nationally, and internationally. And so we're very fortunate to have Namaka with us as well this morning. Aloha, Namaka.
Hey, aloha kako.
Okay, I'm going to jump right in. Mahalo, everyone, for your patience. We got a little behind this morning. We had some technical things that we needed to take care of. And so we're going to try to giddy up and get through this. We are going to be taking Q&A. So if you look at your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you do have questions, please drop them in there. We will try to leave a few minutes at the end of our session to pull up some questions from our attendees and from our audience. Just want to give a really quick mahalo to Erica, who's currently with us from I'll Interpret, providing our ASL services this morning, and also a mahalo to I'll Interpret for the closed captioning as well. And if any of you need to or would like to take advantage of that, there is also a closed captioning button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And a shout out to our friend Bryson Ho, who is here. You can't see him, but he's from our Ohana over at Uivi TV that's providing our technical services. Okay, no leila and avahine. Kawanoi, I was thinking I'd start off with you and see if you could just contextualize what some of the initial barriers were when the program first started.
Okay, well, I would say that it was time and the pressure of urgency. Those were the first barriers, in our mind, because as we know, our nu'ukia, our mission is ʻŌlelo ko ʻŌlelo Hawaii. And the Pūnana Leo is all about just that. It shall live. The Hawaiian language shall live. So the initial pressure was time, because we're trying to rescue or bring our language back from imminent death, the death of our language in our home with our people. And so, first of all, recognizing the problem, which was the dwindling numbers of native speakers at the time, and also that there were no or very few children under 50 who were under 18, who were 18 years and under 50 children who could speak Hawaiian at that time. And so that urgency, I think, was a barrier, but also gave us motivation to create what we did, which was to do something. And Pūnana Leo really is about solutions. What do we do about what we have right in front of us? The problem that we see, first of all, you have to recognize the problem. And then what are we going to do about it? And so we're about that. And that started right at the beginning. And it really continued over time, changing of a mindset, kind of locked into an English language medium mindset. And everything that comes with that created those barriers right from the beginning, all the way through time until today, actually. Mm-hmm. Bills that we have in the legislature. So just briefly, that's what I recognize as being significant for us way back there in the beginning.
Well, Kawa, Namaka, maybe you can speak a little bit to, as Kawa's talking about there are barriers that exist that are put up that are just a construct of things that have happened and kind of the social factors, if you will, and having to make up for lost time, I think is one of the things that Kawa was bringing forth. And Namaka, maybe you can speak to some of the policy or even legal barriers that had to be overcome during those initial years.
Okay, yeah. So I think the one, because we were working with young children, because we are now working with young children, families and young children, and having a structure of licensed centers, licensed preschools or care centers that would put what kind of staff could be considered, your staffing of these centers. And so the first barrier would be that because we're working against time, we have a few remaining native speakers left, the ability to stand up a center for families to bring the children to, and then for us to care for them in a total Hawaiian language environment in these licensed, regulated centers, regulated by the state. We had to change the law that would allow us to bring and count our old people to be able to work with us that were younger second language learners learning our language, to be able to then be counted as, to provide that safe environment, to meet the standards of licensing these safe environments for little babies, that we were successful in that, in changing that. And now we came up against, the national associations that do these early learning and care centers that did not feel that we should be given this exemption, so that we could, they were worried, that as if we didn't know how to take care of children already, having had, being parents and all of that, that it was like, all right, what are you guys gonna do? Make these old people go, and you don't have them be licensed, be, credentialed. And we said, no, they're not gonna go back to school. These are the golden years. They come with their wisdom already. We need their language. We're working, like Kawanoi said, we're working against time. So yes, that's an example of something we did.
Mahalo nui Namaka, as you're talking, I think one of the things that's apparent, I think for our experience in Hawaii anyway, is that the ohana that become involved in the program, first of all, it is a family affair. The program has never been one where you drop your baby off at 8 o'clock in the morning and then you pick up said keiki at 4 or whatever it is. The Pūnana Leo has been characterized as a family-based learning center. It's actually, one of the requirements for admission is a family commitment. And I think what I've witnessed over the years is that these families quickly learn that it is so much more than just a preschool or an early childhood education experience. I just want to put forth that a lot of the things that you're talking about in overcoming some of these legal barriers and institutional barriers of licensure and meeting teacher certification and all of these things are something that the parents themselves engage directly in advocacy and just trying to be a part of, be civically engaged, if you will, in order to make things happen. Little did you know, you were sending your child to preschool and now you're, an advocate for Hawaiian language. And Ekekela, I know that you experienced that yourself as a parent, as we mentioned, as one of those initial parents in the program. And just wondering if you could speak to that, your personal experience of, and maybe it wasn't a challenge for a really long time, but just having to embrace that and be a part of that process of what it means to be a parent in this program.
Mahalo. I think one of the biggest things that when we talk about the Hawaiian language shall live, and first on as being a parent and coming into the program, you learn really quickly that it is a way of life. And if this is not what you want in a short period of time, you can make the decision to move on. But what happens is, and I will always, this is always a big part for myself and my family. You learn, I learned early on what advocacy meant and how we need to stand up for our children and how we need to fight for what we want to come true in everything we do. And so I will focus in on the programs that were that began the founding programs of our Pūnana Leo, which I feel is what makes the Pūnana Leo a Pūnana Leo. The family programs, our ability to be active in learning. That is something that we needed to do from the very beginning, learning our language. And it's difficult. And in my time as a pioneering parent, I did not know. Grandma spoke Hawaiian, but I did not know. And so this is something very new for me. However, I think the change came about when I realized that my son, the baby, is the one that was absorbing all of this. And I need to hurry up and jump on the wagon or he'll leave me behind. And so many of our families, that's what we did. And when you see this blossoming or the growth of our language, the growth of our Hawaiian perspective and how we raise our children, that's why we chose to educate our children at the Pūnana Leo. So it is about being a part of learning our language, being a part of holding our responsibility as a growing family in the program, doing our part. We call that the Hana Makua. And it's not about having to clean the school. It is about what do I contribute to my school so that my child can not only have a learning environment, but also see that as a parent, this is what we do. As Poe Hawaii, as Hawaiian people, this is what we do. We contribute to everything in the education of our children. And lastly, having the support group, being the support group for our children as well as our staff and the overall organization. For many of our families, we've learned a lot, and there's probably much more to be said about that. But for now, I think that's a good beginning.
Kako, hallelujah, eke kala. Kawana, I'm going to come back to you and maybe ask you to share a little bit about the experience as the keiki started to matriculate. So I'm thinking specifically, the very first keiki, first couple of years are at Pūnana Leo. And while there were barriers there that had to do with particular departments, if you will, in this Department of Human Services that in Hawaii, in the United States, perhaps has jurisdiction over childcare centers. One thing that we didn't mention, and I'll just throw out there really quickly, is that there was still an 1896 law on the books when Pūnana Leo was started that effectively banned the use of Hawaiian in the classroom. So there were some real legal barriers that had to be overcome initially just to start to malama these little babies in Hawaiian. And then, women would think, okay, figured those out, got over those hurdles, okay, a little bit smooth sailing maybe, but then, okay, hello, now they need to go into the DOE K-12 system. And maybe, Kau, if you can speak a little bit to what the experience has been like in working with these people in the community who are within these institutions. And so I'm thinking about DOE principals and or DOE superintendents and how you folks were able to engage with them in order to overcome some of the barriers that continued to pop up over the years.
Well, let me say one more time about the Pūnana Leo and what it's about. It's about ʻŌlelo ʻŌlelo Hawaii, and that's it. So there are whatever little bumps in the road. We just consider them bumps in the road. Whatever happens. So a person who is not accustomed to thinking about something different, like we had in mind, ʻŌlelo ʻŌlelo Hawaii within the school setting, needs help. Okay, so we have to help that person understand, get along with this program because we're going to make you look good, because we believe and really believe in the mission and also the value of integrity in doing our work. So like you mentioned, there was a time that, we could have had our school shut down or somebody could have come and arrested us for doing what we were doing. Yeah, but that never happened. But it could have happened. And the reason why it didn't happen was because of how we did it. And we did it with a way that was cooperative, in helping other people to understand. So it wasn't like we were protesting something, but instead really ho'opono, making things correct again, which is the way that we think about the mission, Eola Ka'olelo Hawaii. So it's a difficult task. That is, people who are ingrained and indoctrinated in a way of thinking about education, the English language as being the way, the only way. I mean, years and years and generations of that kind of mindset. So our history really is about adjusting or pretty much overhauling that kind of mindset and showing people, just by looking at our children, hey, maybe there's another road to take of value for our own people, our own Hawaiian people, who are not always, I mean, not all Hawaiians are interested in this either, you know? And we have had people, non-Hawaiians, who are very, very instrumental in helping the Board of Education, for example, our superintendent, Charlie Toguchi, because he knew what we were doing with the preschools in the legislature, advocated to the Board of Education, who then said, let's try this little pilot, a K1 pilot. And that was built on the integrity and what Eke Kela is talking about, of the work of families prior to that time. So we're building a presence, I think, within our government, within our school system, and I guess touching the hearts of people in positions of power to advocate for our children, our families, and what we're doing. So that over time has given us the opportunity to show what the Pūnana Leo is about as the foundational way of thinking, philosophy, and mission within the public school system, which was a decision we made because the Pūnana Leo is private and not-profit, to say, do we want to continue to offer this kind of education option for our parents? You'd have to pay, which is only $110 way back then. Now it's way over, you know, or not. And we decided, no, if we're gonna pay tax dollars, the citizens of Hawaii, for education, we have 2 official languages of our state, then we should be advocating for that kind of education for our children in years to come, which is what those people helped us try out with our pilot back in those years, 1986, 1987. I mean,
mahalo. Yep, mahalo nui and kawanoe for that. And just, I think just to reiterate and drive home what you're saying is that there are definite, since we're talking about, you know, some of the barriers and overcoming some of the hurdles in the process that, you know, kind of persisted because of colonialism and what had taken place and injustices, if you will, that I think there's I don't want to say a knee-jerk reaction, but there definitely has to be an understanding that you're going against the grain. You're doing something that's going to attract attention. You're going to inevitably get pushback, which for a lot of people will result in kind of adversarial situations all the time. But depending on how we embrace that and our perspective on that, just appreciate what you said about it's not necessarily all the time about, you know, banging them over the head with it as much as it is about including them in the educational process and educating them about what this is and why it's important. And whoever that is, it could be someone, you know, in the local elementary school that you're going to have to work with. It could be people in the legislature, the state legislature. I wanted to kind of riff off of that and you know, ask you, Namaka, to speak about, you've had, you know, years of experience in advocacy, and particularly on a national level. And if you could just kind of speak to some of those things, either the large barriers and or just kind of as you reflect, what were some of the biggest victories, if you will, in that space, in the political legal space, in terms of advocacy and gaining more support for a program like what's happening here in Hawaii?
Yeah, so I think so going high level, utilizing, we've learned to you know, the challenges that we've been facing, and we're becoming a little bit more you know, smart in the advocacy work by working with other groups that are looking to Hawaii, that look at the work that we've done over the last 40 years to inform and guide and share with other groups that have been coming to visit us for these many years. And I'm talking about the Native American, Alaska Native folks, and as well as international Ainu and all of that. So part of that work that the Pūnana does is to share, to get out and share with these other Native groups. So utilizing the United Nations, and we're in now the United Nations Declaration, the decade on Indigenous languages, utilizing this time to highlight, work with others to support at this high level. I believe that's, eventually it'll come down and trickle down, and we will benefit here for that. And so some of the things that we've shared is, when you're talking about the structure and justice, is that we have been advocating for the alignment of our language and our culture in producing, what we might say as those standards that we would have drive into our early learning, the earliest of our learners, these little babies, that we resist what might be, I think Kono is kind of talking about what the English medium and what those structures are, and that the alignment of what, we're wanting to produce is not aligned to an English Western sort of standard. So all of these pieces, getting from the top, knowing that we have this protection or advancing for the next decade. We also have a protection under federal law, under the Native American Languages Act of 1990, which comes from the work that we were learning from here in Hawaii in the 1980s, as Kono was talking about, changing the law, 1986, 1987, to be able to go and have education in our language in public education. So it starts, it's like you're meeting and meeting from the top and the bottom to, have this access and to really actualize the law of protecting and using our language as medium in education. So I guess I'm going to say it again, the actualization of laws is done through makahana ka'ike pono kaulike in the justice work. It's our action that brings about these justice. We can have the laws, but we got to actualize it and make it happen.
All right.
Mahalo. Ekekela, I wanted to come back to you again now, kind of talk about over the years, over the decades. We're now 4 decades in, we're 40 years into having this program be in existence. And while you were an initial parent, you also worked with incoming parents for years. I'm just wondering what it was over time. What do you think it was and or continues to be that draws ohana to the program? I know, for the Pūnana Leo that your own Kiki and your Mo'opuna went to, the Pūnana Leo o Hilo, if I'm not mistaken, one is busting at the seams and has a really long waiting list. And so that in and of itself is a testament to something, and similar with Nawahi, the K-12 site as well. What do you think it is that keeps drawing parents to this program despite the barriers that that persist?
I think that's a really interesting question, because over these years that I've been a part of Aha Pūnana Leo, and here I am now in Hana working with Kulakai Puni o Hana, as well as the Pūnana Leo o Hana. Just recently, as we had a hui ki pai pai, where we gather our families together to grow our families. There was one particular evening that we spoke about. We did kuka kame'ilio. We had groups of conversations between our parents. And we asked literally that same question: what brings you here to Pūnana Leo, or to our Hawaiian medium education? And I was a little bit, not shocked, but happy to hear the same thoughts that probably came out a while ago, right? And so with that, the same is wanting our children to understand who they are, wanting them to understand where they come from, understand our traditional knowledge or our kupuna knowledge, and how we pass down this information to them, but to be able to stand on their own through their Hawaiian language, but also their ike Hawaii. So I think as a parent, as I sat there and I was listening to everybody, this is the exact same thing that we wanted from day one, and to know that it continues to be in that direction. For me, it is about the foundation that we build in the Pūnana leo to get them ready to move on and carry our responsibility as families, not only the child, but as families throughout their years, as our children grow and go through elementary school, intermediate school, as well as high school, and off we go to college. But they'll carry this ike that we'll probably not get anywhere else. And so that made me really happy to know that it still lives. And I think when one of the biggest things that I can remember is that we always got to remember kanui and not the pakahi. And that's the movement we always take as a family, that we always have to take care of one another, the whole organization as a whole. And we have to move together to be successful as families.
You know, we technically, if we're following the schedule that was laid out for this particular panel, we're coming to our last couple of minutes. Just want to let everybody know who's in attendance that we're probably going to go over a few minutes because we got started a little bit late. However, I wanted to, you know, kind of what we've been focusing on is this notion of justice in action. And I think inherent in there is the understanding that there were some injustices that occurred, and therefore this need to seek justice. And I know we've talked a lot about various ways, various barriers that have popped up, whether they're legal, political, whether they're, you know, in our own communities, from our own ohana, maybe sometimes. And so while we've been talking a lot about barriers, I just thought, you know, as a way to wrap up, and by the way, to our participants, if anyone wants to drop, you know, questions in the Q&A box below, please do. But without that, I'm just going to go around and ask each of you, and we'll go the opposite way. Ekekela, I'll start with you, is just some gems perhaps that you'd like to leave with the audience in terms of barriers exist, things happened, but kind of what you think one of the most important things is to remember in order to be successful and overcome those barriers. And so I'll come back to you with that, Ekekela.
Okay. I think I want to start off with the, throughout my years with Aha Pūnana leo, I've learned a lot as well. And one of the important thoughts that I always take with me is called Ike Kālailai Aoni. And so when we look at something, we take a look of what's happening, and then we have to take the opportunity to analyze what's happening, to make sure we take the right decisions and make the right decisions in moving forward, because that's the ultimate course that we want to take, is moving it forward. So along this same line, more recently, there's a lot of hurdles that come into our way, not only for our preschool level, but more so for at the higher levels, in the elementary school levels, up to the high school. And we have to make these decisions come out to our plate without us knowing. And then you have to take a look at it and figure out, what is it we're going to do? What is the most sensible thing to make, and to make this movement happen for the benefit of our children and our program? It is not an easy task. And sometimes it's a battle between what some entities, agencies feel that it's important for us to follow, that we have to fit the same shoes, we have to follow the right direction with them. That doesn't work, not for us. Mm-hmm. And for always in our organization, it's always we have to look out for the betterment of our program as well as our children. So advocacy is one of the biggest tools that I think I've learned throughout the years, and that we continue to train our families on understanding what's happening. Take a good look at it. Let's not jump too fast, but make sure we analyze it really well before we make the choices to move on. For me, that's the biggest momi that I could leave behind to be successful in what we are doing.
Yeah, mahalo nui e ke kela. Namaka lo'a ko mana'o?
Well, that's Ekik, I ditto, echo Ekikela's words. I think the greatest satisfaction that I've seen as well is this empowerment of ourselves, giving that, empowering ourselves to do what is right for our families, and empowering, being as what is that, like, together, working for the better, for the good. I think the movement has really given us the opportunity to contribute, and I think that's the greatest thing I see, is that you are actually part of solution-oriented, solution-making. You're a part, you're not just complaining. You're a part of the solution, and we, like Ekikela says, we analyze. We just don't be puni to anything that comes and shines in, all the puni shining things. No, we don't buy those things. So this is what this movement has done. It's like collaborative work, all of those, coming together, and self-determination.
Kako. I'm going to throw in before your final thoughts in terms of, gems of how to address some of the barriers. There's a specific question that came in, I think that's on point. And it has to do with, well, there's two actually. And the first one has to do with kind of something that you touched on earlier, or we talked about, I think, is the way that you deal with people who have a different perspective than you. And the question specifically was, it had to do with being in environments or dealing with the dominant speaking community, whatever that is. For us in Hawaii, that's English, whether that's Spanish in, Latin American communities, how to address that and kind of deal with those pressures and those kinds of, I think, entities, institutions, and individuals who are going to push back because of that, because this is a non-dominant language. And then kind of tied to that is the ano, or the way that we deal with them. It kind of maybe had come across that we're advocating for a non-confrontational approach. Are we trying to say to pick your battles, or would you have another way to kind of characterize how to deal with that?
Well, the Hawaiian language belongs to a people. It belongs to a way. It belongs to a culture. So to really hold the integrity of ʻŌlelo ʻŌlelo Hawaii, it has to believe that our language and our culture has a way and has value. In the past, it had values past, in the present, and in the future. And so I think I mentioned before about the Hawaiian or any foreign language mindset. Or even thinking about it as being dominant or not dominant, which is that kind of binary way of thinking about things, is also a trap, So in order to really stay focused on understanding the importance of Hawaiian, importance of language, has to be real, it has to have aloha and it has to have integrity. And it also has to have a real sense of resiliency. And so it's not about being arrogant or try to compete or be higher or lower. Because a lot of thoughts come out are divisive, but you can't. No, we're not going to fall for that one, So if you believe and stay consistent and strong over time, eventually those people will understand. Oh, there are other people in the world. There are other people that have lived a long time, who can contribute to the quality of life. So one of the barriers is ourselves, and how we think about what we do. So we got to come back to over here, me, and then us in our little kipuka, our families, and then our communities. And then comes the larger and the world, So if we think about ourselves as Hawaiians and as being positive, and because when you look at our kupuna way back at the time when we first began, they were already in their 80s. They were strong and resilient, just the way that they were. You know, they had stories, but they never had that downcasted, tread upon type of spirit.
Yeah.
You know, they were, you know, fight back kind of way and hold on to what we have. And they showed it just by their lavena, the way that they were, their behavior, the way that they spoke, what they laughed at, what they ate, how we all cracked up and enjoyed each other, you know? So that's what we're taking forward. That's what we're carrying on. And you, I guess, like I said at the beginning, recognize the signs of those things. No, we're not going to go there with that. No, we're not going to take up somebody else's, I don't know, problem or baggage or personal thing. It is about the collective, and not to forget that.
Mahalo ya'oko e kolu no keia manawa. Thank you to all three of you for taking the time and being here and just sharing your insight, you know, garnered, well, over a lifetime, but definitely over the last 40 years of Aha Pūnana Leo doing the amazing work that it's done. You know, the Pūnana Leo started with a very small group of people. That was actually one of the questions that came in. You know, there was work that had been done in Hawaii prior to the establishment of Aha Pūnana Leo. I think we were all acknowledging of that. You know, there were things that happened that allowed our language to persist and not completely die off, if you will. But you know, it was a very small group of individuals, you know, that came together, and I'm going to say like maybe 7, 10, 12 people got together and literally, the way I hear it, you know, hung out at someone's house over the weekend and started to talk about the status of the language, and that while things were happening and there were efforts taking place, they clearly were not going to be enough to revitalize the Hawaiian language to where it would once again be a living language that's used every day in all contexts and situations in Hawaii. And so that very small group of people kind of came together and made it happen. And, you know, I think this Justice in Action, Aha Pūnana Leo, is a torchbearer of that. There wasn't a whole lot of money, there wasn't a whole lot of people, and there were still legal barriers on the books, but it was not about trying to overcome those before ever getting started. You know, that was another question that came in, is how long did it take to change some of these laws? You know, it might have taken initially a couple of 2, 3, 5 years. I mean, there's still things that we battle on a legal political front, but that never stopped the program from starting. And so I think that's also critical for that person who raised that question, is, you know, get together, get some community members and who are going to be steadfast and just continue to do the work, no matter what those barriers are that pop up, and work together to overcome them, no matter what they are. You know, there was another question that was specific to what linguists can help with. And we actually have an amazing linguist that's going to be on a panel with us a couple panels from now. And so if that participant is able to hold on, we'll jump into that as well. But all of that to say, again, mahalo nui ya'oko e kolu, not only for being here with us today, but for the work that you've done over the past 40 years and the work that you continue to do. We really appreciate it. Aloha.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo nui. Aloha.
Aloha.
And for our participants, we're going to take a really, really quick break. I know we're running behind a few minutes. We're going to put up a plate, and then we are going to invite the next set of panelists to join us here. And so we'll be back hopefully in a couple of minutes with our second panel for this first day of the Hilo Field Experience. Aloha.